A failed experiment? The Home Secretary wants to shake up immigration, but what's her plan? Well, she's here to tell us with her opposite number, Chris Philp from the Conservatives. A review of grooming gangs is also due to be published in the next few weeks. One victim goes public for the first time, telling us she's no faith in politicians to put it right.
I want justice like we was promised. I don't want him to, no one's taking accountability for it.
And get ready, because this will wake you up.
Hello, you're out there.
2 number ones, 1 billion streams and millions of fans. We meet Yungblud, an icon for Gen Z.
You start something as a musician and then you kind of connect with people on a daily basis. Like, I always make an effort to see people outside the gigs and see people walk around a festival, and this whole community was built on human connection about how people live.
And our team at the desk for the next hour this week. Nobel Prize winner, no less, Joseph Stiglitz, Dr. Shan Williams, psychologist and broadcaster, and Louis Mosley, the UK boss of the tech giant Palantir. Morning. Let's start, as we always do, by what's making the news today. We're talking about immigration, so are many of the front pages. The Sunday Times claims one businessman has become a billionaire running asylum hotels. The Mail on Sunday and the Sunday Express both splash on Yvette Cooper's plans. We'll be asking her about in a few minutes. And here at the BBC, the website's leading on Vladimir Putin's late-night call for direct talks between Russia and Ukraine. But the Sunday Mirror takes a different tack. It leads on Meghan Markle's dad moving to the Philippines. Well, welcome to all of you this morning. Now, Joseph, we're going to be talking about immigration, and it's very hotly contested in almost every way. But help us out on this central question. Is immigration good for the economy or not?
Overall, I think it's good. It affects demand and supply. Most economies, modern economies, have real needs for immigrants in particular areas. I can tell you for the United States, if we didn't have immigrants, we would come to a screeching halt.
And in terms of the UK, Louis, as an employer here, we know the government, and we're going to hear in more detail, they're bringing in more and more controls on legal migration. As an employer, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Does it make your life harder?
We employ very much the high skill, high wage end of the spectrum. And I think for that, I don't expect to see any of these changes really affect those kinds of jobs. We want to bring those very, very skilled people into the country, just as Joseph said. But my concern would be broader around public trust. I think for the last 15 years, we've elected 5 governments now that have all promised to bring down net migration, and it consistently hasn't happened.
And Shan, during that time, the public conversation about immigration has really changed, hasn't it? I mean, I remember 2009, I think Gordon Brown said British jobs for British workers, and that seemed shocking to some people in Labour circles, but that's the kind of thing now. It's very common for our politicians to say that. What do you think of the change?
Well, there has been a huge change. I remember in 1999 being sent by BBC News up to Glasgow to do the Kosovan refugees, if you remember. And I mean, since then, the numbers have gone up hugely. Of course, the financial cost has gone up hugely, but also I think the language has shifted from asylum seekers, refugees. There was talk of illegal immigrants for a while, and I think there was some confusion about what that meant and whether it might be dehumanising. So I think there are lots of challenges that all governments have faced: the numbers, the finances, and making things human.
OK, well, lots to talk about then with the Home Secretary and with you three a bit later in the show. Let's get on with our main event. This is how things have changed. Back in 2012, you can see the number of people moving legally to the UK was bumping around the 200,000 mark. It was there for a while, dropped off during COVID, but then soared to that all-time high you can see there in 2023. Some Tory reforms have caused the numbers to slide a little bit. You can see that on the graph. And they are expected to fall a bit more. But the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister will vow to bring the numbers down further. But how? Let's find out with the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Welcome to the studio. Laura. Good morning. So We know quite a lot about some of your proposals. Skilled workers will have to have degree-level education if they want to come here. Businesses will have to prove to you if they need low-skilled workers to be able to bring them in. But aren't you making it harder for people to do business in the UK?
Well, what we're doing is it's a fundamental shift in the approach to say that the immigration system should be properly linked to skills and training here in the UK. What you saw on that chart was really this failed free market experiment with which the Conservatives replaced free movement, where employers were effectively encouraged to recruit from wherever they wanted to, including they actually had a 20% discount on wages if they recruited from overseas rather than training here in the UK. Well, that is a broken approach, and that's why we saw overseas recruitment saw training being cut. We're switching that round and now saying we'll bring in new visa controls, particularly on the lower skilled migration, to bring that down, and also new requirements for workforce strategies, for training commitments, and for that better working to get people who are not working back into the labour market here in the UK.
But workplace strategies, training requirements, those things might be felt by some businesses to be extra burdens, extra admin, and also for a simple point of fact, the National Builders Federation, for example, has said to the BBC, look, it takes 2 years to train an apprentice. What are they meant to do in the meantime? They say this will make it more difficult to hit your target of building houses in this country.
Well, construction is quite a good example, because for construction we will have a temporary shortage list. It replaces some of what's been effectively permanent shortage lists that never got turned around. New, much narrower temporary shortage list. And construction, we're drawing up the workforce strategy at the same time. So Bridget Phillipson has set out plans to train 60,000 more construction workers. So that way, what you're saying is we invest in the UK workforce in the short term. While that workforce is being trained, they will be able to continue to recruit from abroad. But there are a lot of other occupations, about 180 different occupations, that we're saying, actually, you shouldn't be able to recruit from abroad. You should be recruiting here in the UK. You should be training and investing workers in the UK instead.
But do you accept that all of this, whether it's for good or for ill, and some people might like the idea of more homegrown workers having to take jobs in the UK, but do you accept that this is extra burden for business? You know, in a free market, businesses, you want businesses to grow, they want to hire the people they need right now. And you're making that more complicated.
So, but if that approach was right, we would have seen, when we saw that soaring level of net migration, that soaring level of overseas recruitment, well, surely we would have seen soaring growth alongside it, and we didn't. Actually, what we saw was the economy flatline, because by failing to invest in UK workers, that also undermines productivity, it undermines the ability to get people back into the work who are currently not working. So alongside those record highs of overseas recruitment, we also had this big increase in people just not working here in the UK. Those things are linked.
There are specific, very serious concerns. So let's think about, you know, the NHS and the care sector. And the care sector has relied on foreign workers because they just haven't been able to get UK people to do the jobs. The Tories changed the rules, so there's already been a drop-off in the number of visas being given to care workers coming in from abroad. Do you want to cut that still further? Can you see a day even when you say no care workers should come in from abroad?
Yes, we do. And we're going to change those rules this year to prevent the care worker visa being used to recruit from abroad. So we will close, yes. So, but we will allow them to continue to extend visas and also to recruit from. There's more than 10,000 people who came on a care worker visa where the sponsorship visa was cancelled. Effectively, they came to jobs that weren't actually here or that were not of the proper standard. They are here, and care companies should be recruiting from that pool of people rather than recruiting from abroad. So we are closing recruitment from abroad. That is a significant change, and we're doing it alongside saying we need to bring in a new fair pay agreement for care workers, because we saw that huge increase in care work recruitment from abroad, but without actually ever tackling the problems in the system in the care sector.
But there are already shortages in that sector. I can almost imagine somebody running a care home emailing us right now saying, I can't get staff. Where are they meant to get their staff from?
Well, we want them to recruit. We've got this pool of people who came as care workers in good faith, they were recruited, but because there were no proper checks in place, because there were no proper standards, what instead happened was people were being exploited, really badly exploited. Those workers are still here. Care companies should be recruiting from those workers. They can also extend existing visas. They could recruit as well from people who are on other visas who are already here. But we do think it's time to end that care worker recruitment from abroad.
Some universities are very worried about this, though, too. Are you going to remove the right of graduates from overseas who qualify here to stay in the UK when they've finished their studies?
Well, we'll set out more details on this tomorrow. We are making some changes, but we will continue to value international students, to welcome international students, and we will continue to have arrangements where they can work after they graduate.
But that sounds like you are going to remove the automatic right that they have to stay for 2 years after they qualify.
We will let them continue to come and to stay and to work afterwards. We are making some changes, particularly around the standards and the compliance for universities, because, again, we've had problems where some universities haven't had proper standards in place. They've recruited people to come as international students who then haven't completed their courses, have either overstayed or caused other problems with compliance in the system. So we're going to increase those standards.
I think the two really interesting things that it would be great if you could answer these questions directly, because you say this is a big change in the approach. Do you think that your government has to cut these numbers, whatever the costs might be, whatever the difficulties might be for the care sectors, whatever the costs might be for the university sector, which is under a lot of financial pressure? So is this cut the numbers, whatever the cost?
We do need to bring net migration down.
Whatever the cost.
That huge increase that we had is not sustainable.
But it's coming down anyway, Home Secretary. So are you determined to bring it down still further, whatever the costs?
We do believe it needs to come down further. But the issue is that we're doing this in a way that also supports the economy by saying there's got to be requirements for training here in the UK as well. Because I think the approach that we've had, where effectively there's no link, so anybody can just recruit from abroad, but no requirements to train in the UK, no actually addressing the serious problems. In the care sector, for example, we're bringing in a fair pay agreement because we know part of the problem has been around pay and terms and conditions. You've got to tackle those problems. If we carry on ignoring those deep-rooted problems in the labour market, we just carry on always thinking that immigration is the answer, then actually you just undermine both the economy and the credibility of the immigration system.
So if people would like you to directly answer this, how much change to the numbers do you hope to see as a result of these plans? By how much do you hope to cut the overall number of visas being granted?
So we're setting out plans for a substantial reduction in net migration. You'll know that we've had many targets, promises from Conservative governments in the past, all of which have been broken. I think they've undermined the credibility of anything that governments do, and that's why we're not taking that approach. So we're not taking that specific target approach.
But you are specifically saying...
I can tell you specifically on those visas, on the changes to the skilled worker visa to reduce lower skilled migration, combined with the changes to the care worker visa. Those changes will come in the course of this year, and those changes together will we expect to lead to a reduction of up to 50,000 fewer lower skilled visas over the course of the next year. And we'll set out other measures as well, but we're going to do this in a step-by-step managed approach.
I just wonder, as we were talking to Joseph Stiglitz about traditionally, and you are an economist by training, former Treasury Minister too, immigration has been seen as being good for the economy. Do you now believe in some circumstances immigration is bad for the economy?
I think economic migration can bring huge benefits, for example, in tackling skills shortages, making sure that we can get the highest talent. And remember, as a country, we have always had people through generations coming to work in our National Health Service, set up businesses and so on. That is important, but it needs to be controlled and managed so the system is fair. If you have these very high levels of overseas recruitment, no training here in the UK, then the consequence is you see these distortions in the labour market. You see these actually undermining the economy. It's bad for productivity. It's bad for growth, and just means it's a continual short-termism in the system rather than investing in productivity.
So immigration can sometimes undermine the economy. Right. That's interesting. Yeah. We've talked to you on lots of other occasions about the other side of this coin, illegal immigration, and whether that's small boats or asylum hotels. We're short on time today, but I do just want you to elaborate on something that has been suggested by the Home Office overnight. When things go wrong with foreign nationals who are here, the Home Office is now going to be told straight away when a foreign national has committed an offence. What would you do with that information? Are you confident that will lead to, do you want to deport more people, or what's your plan?
So we've increased the deportations, removals of foreign national offenders by 16% since the election. We want to go further. At the moment, the Home Office is not notified if people don't get a custodial sentence, but there are lots of repeat offenders who might be here on short-term visas. Those visas should be revoked. People should be returned. So we're going to bring in new procedures that will mean that the Home Office gets much more information about people committing crimes and can, as a result, take much swifter action on revoking visas and on removals as well.
So your plan is to deport more foreign nationals who commit crime. That's a commitment to people today.
That's what we think needs to happen. We know that it will take
the same
time.
as
yes,
committing to doing it.
Yes, that's our intention. We're already doing it. We're already doing it. We know some of the new procedures will take time, but this is because I just believe if you come to the UK, if you're given a visa to come to the UK, you should abide by UK laws. That's part of respect for the rules and making sure that those rules are respected and enforced.
OK, Home Secretary, one of the other issues that we've discussed with you previously is around grooming gangs. Now, it's an important issue to many people. It's seen very much as a national scandal. And in the last couple of days, we have learned that the Casey report that's been looking at this is likely to be published in the next couple of weeks. But yesterday, I sat down with one of the victims of this terrible crime, one of those young victims abused by groups of men for many years. Their stories were often ignored and hardly any action taken. Steph, who I met, whose story was told in a recent documentary for Channel 4, has now decided to go public for the first time, waiving her right to anonymity. No one has ever faced justice for abusing her from the age of 12, and she believes that one of her abusers was a police officer. I spoke to her alongside the detective turned campaigner, Maggie Oliver, who first met her when she told of what was going on.
I was 12, nearly 13. Yeah. I lived in the children's home, started going out with some of the girls, trying to make friends. They take me to different flats where we drink, take drugs, cocaine. I was just drunk all the time, being young. Then obviously being introduced to different males.
And what was done to you?
I was sexually abused, passed around, just locked in a house, flat I should say. Just passed to people taking turns on me.
What was that like for you to have that happen at such a terribly young age when you were so vulnerable?
I don't know. I was troubled. I was very troubled as young. I was screaming out for help. No one was listening to me. It's like I self-sabotaged myself.
What would you like then to happen now?
I want justice like we was promised. I don't want him to, no one's taking accountability for it.
She just found her voice after 20 years. She told me what had happened 20 years ago. That's the scandal here.
Grooming gangs have become a huge topic of conversation among politicians. What's it like for you hearing those things, hearing that sort of really angry political conversation about grooming?
Yeah, it makes me angry. Especially the comment of the dog whistler and stuff like that. It's not very nice to us as victims.
So the government minister, Lucy Powell, said when someone else raised grooming gangs, it was a dog whistle.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you heard that?
She's not been through nothing herself, has she? She doesn't know how we actually feel. We've got a constant reminder of it every day. And it's still going on.
But do you think this is still happening, that grooming gangs are still targeting vulnerable young girls like you were?
Yeah, you see it in certain areas. I've seen it myself. You see young girls still doing as what I was doing. And I wish I could just go over to them and drag them away.
Steph is here speaking. There are thousands of victims and survivors like Steph who feel betrayed.
Is that what you feel, Steph?
Yeah, betrayed.
Why?
Well, false hope, isn't it? We were going to put it right and they haven't. It's lies what they've done. It's sickening.
Do you feel after all this time then that politicians and the police still aren't listening?
No, they're not listening. They ain't listening.
Maggie and Steph, thanks so much for speaking to us today. Thank you. Well, the documentary with more of those stories is still on the Channel 4 streaming platform, and Greater Manchester Police have told us in Steph's case they've accepted and apologised for past failings and are committed to ensuring victims are listened to. Home Secretary, it's very affecting when you hear a young woman who's been through what Steph went through, years of abuse from the age of 12, say politicians are still not listening. What do you say to that?
These are, the most horrendous crimes of all, against children, particularly young girls, young women as well. The most awful exploitation and sexual crimes, just horrendous. And it's also devastating what Steph, of course, has gone through, just awful. And to be let down as well so many times, both by perpetrators committing the crimes and then by the failures of systems to properly sort that out and get justice. I think the most urgent thing is we still need much stronger police investigations into these crimes. We need to see more of these perpetrators behind bars, and we need to see the action taken. So we have obviously instigated much stronger response now from police across the country, and we're waiting, as you said, for the Louise Casey report to come back.
But you've refused a national inquiry, and we've talked about that before, but many of the ideas suggested previously by another major inquiry into child abuse won't be implemented for years. I know you set out a plan, so you don't need to say you set out a plan, but many of the ideas won't come into force till 2026, even 2027. Where's the urgency for people like her? You've been in charge for nearly a year, and she believes you're not on this, you don't get it.
So the immediate action that we've taken, that I think is probably the most important, is to fund increased police investigations and to also to call on every police chief constable in the country to now review what they are doing and to reopen closed cases where no further action was taken, because we need that police investigation to pursue those perpetrators and prevent those crimes taking place, including historic crimes as well as crimes that are still taking place. But of course, you are right. There is more that we need to do, and that's why the Louise Casey report, I think, will set out really the scale of the challenge nationally. As you know, with Louise, she does no-holds-barred reports and very hard-hitting.
And in terms of that report, will you commit today that you will publish that? You will publish it straight away?
We will publish the report. I haven't received the report yet, so I don't know what Louise's conclusions are, but she has been looking at, particularly it's the scale and nature of it across the country and the problems that have been faced.
And if she tells you, she's known for her plain speaking, that this is a bigger problem than previously thought, would you consider again having a national inquiry, which is what opposition parties want you to do?
Well, I am concerned actually about the scale of the problem, because I think that police forces, local authorities are still not taking enough action against it. So I would also want to set up a child protection agency, as well as having the mandatory.
And you've not put a date on when you're going to do that, but that's interesting. I just wonder, would you look again at the notion of having a national inquiry if Louise Casey comes to you and says, this is bigger than we thought. Nothing has changed since she did a report years ago on what was happening in Rotherham, for example. Would you look at it again?
Well, what we'll look at is what is the action that is needed to deliver change and to make sure both that victims can get justice and also that perpetrators can end up behind bars. So I haven't seen Louise's recommendations yet. We'll of course, look at all of them. But the most important thing is to do things that deliver justice, deliver action, as you'll know, we have had the national inquiry into child abuse, which lasted 7 years. We have other inquiries. The undercover policing inquiry, for example, is still underway, and that has been going for 10 years. I think there's been a lot of these inquiries over a long period of time. The biggest question is about what is the urgent action that we need to take. But of course, we will look at whatever Louise comes forward with about whatever further action is needed.
And very briefly, Steph says she still sees this happening. She sees it happening in communities where she lives. And it sounds like you also
That's my big concern, is that I think police need much stronger action right now into these kinds of crimes to prevent them happening now. It's why we're also strengthening the law on child exploitation, including also online grooming, and strengthening the sentencing requirements on grooming as well. The online is a really important growing aspect of this, and that is now linked as well.
You do fear that grooming gangs are still operating?
I think we need to continue, because we've seen it happening online. It is growing. We've seen the massive increase online, and that's why we need stronger laws, but stronger police action as well.
Home Secretary, thanks very much.
Thank
Always
you.
good to have you with us in the studio ahead of a big day for you tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And if you have been affected by any of the issues in our conversation with Steph, there are lots of resources, help and support on the BBC Action Line website. The address for that is there for you on the screen. And of course, remember, we want to know what you think. You can email us, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or on social media, use the hashtag BBC Laura Kay, and we'd like to know what you thought of what Yvette Cooper's plans on immigration are. Let's then start with what we were discussing, Sian, about these grooming gangs. Now, you are a journalist, people will recognise you from that, but you are now a psychologist and working with some vulnerable people. What did you make of what we've just been discussing and what you heard from Steph there?
Well, I thought it was really powerful, and I can only commend Steph for speaking, because it's hard enough to sit in front of a psychologist if you've experienced sexual violence at an early age and talk about it, but to do it in public, that's a big thing. And if Steph is watching, it will make a huge difference to those who are hearing her voice but know the experience that she's gone through. Trauma comes from the Greek for wound, and that's what it's like. It's a wound to the soul. And when I heard Steph saying things like she's self-sabotaging and that she lives with this every day, it feels like a life sentence. You know, you are carrying shame, which is not yours to hold. You are living a life sentence which should go to somebody else. This is the difficulty that people are facing. I was really gratified to hear the Home Secretary talking about the potential of reopening closed cases and getting some justice. I would say that if that is being done, what would be really helpful is those involved in child protection cases and those cases are trauma-informed. Because very often, if you've been through a trauma, memories are fractured. And therefore, the narrative might not seem coherent, and it's really difficult. These are very vulnerable people. So I would say make sure that those who are dealing with them know what they're doing. Okay. And again, well done to Steph, really.
And we'll definitely hear more about this in the coming weeks, because we expect the Dame Louise Casey's report, which the Home Secretary committed to publishing, we expect that to be published sometime towards the end of this month. Let's then turn to our main discussion with the Home Secretary on immigration and the economy. It was interesting, Joseph, to hear her say then, in some cases, immigration can undermine the economy. As a Nobel Prize winner, where do you think the UK economy is right now? How shaky do you think it is? Or are there signs, as the government hopes, of things getting a bit better?
Well, the UK has had some long-term problems, like lack of productivity. Some of those problems were exacerbated by Brexit. It didn't make things any easier. And then your UK is immersed, like all the other countries, in the post-pandemic inflation, the war, Russian invasion of Ukraine was a big disturbance to the global economy. And then finally, we have Trump, trade war, another big disturbance to the economy. In that context, my sense is you need all the buffers you can, all the flexibility you can
anything you can get.
Anything you can get.
What then
there are going to be supply shortages. There are going to be, one of the things we're talking about in the United States is what Trump is doing couldn't be worse. At the same time, he's destroying long-established supply chains. He's also trying to constrain the immigrants that we need.
He did, though, this week, Louis, do a trade deal, such as it has become titled. Some people say it's a bit skinny. Well, I'll be interested in your view in just a second. But you were actually there, I understand, with the Trump-Starmer big first talks in February. You were there in D.C., in the White House, I think. Are you worried in the way that Joseph is about what Trump's doing and the impact on the economy?
Well, I think the trade deal that was signed this week was a good first step, but it does only cover most industrial goods, and that is far from being the majority of our combined US-UK economies. So I think there's a lot more still to go. One thing that I found very promising was in the Oval Office itself, you'll have seen Trump and Lord Mandelson, the British ambassador, talking about the next phase, about a tech partnership. And I think tech and science is where it now needs to go.
And people, if they don't know, Palantir is a huge company in the US. You've got lots of contracts with the White House, and your founder, Peter Thiel, I think, has got a lot of relationship with Donald Trump. But you were making a face, shall I say, politely, when Louis was praising the US-UK trade deal such as it is. How would you describe it?
I would have strong reservations on a number of grounds. First, it undermined one of the basic, long-standing principles of the rule of law in international trade, which is what's called the most favored nations principle. You give the same treatment to everybody. And it was an attempt, it's been what Trump is trying to do, is bargain here, bargain there, destroy what has been created over 80 years after World War II.
So
and
did he pull
you are complicitous in this undermining the international rule of law, and I wouldn't be proud of that.
Did Keir Starmer have one pulled over on him? I mean, was the UK taken for a ride?
I think he was trying to do the best he could in a particular frame of mind where he's going off on his own. And the question is that the best frame of mind? My own view is bargaining needs to be done in strength. If you're a strong economy like China, you can bargain strongly. So UK is not that big. If UK had joined EU in bargaining, and you could have done it, even though you're outside of the EU, you can get together without anybody else and bargain, then you would have been bargaining with strength. That's exactly what Trump wanted. Piece by piece, take the weakest country first, get that, then go after the next country. It is, as I say, a strategy where he hopes to win. And finally, let me pick up what was just said. Trump doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand trade, and he's focusing on trade in goods, steel, cars. A 21st century economy is about services.
And as
like
you
tech
said,
services.
Tech, which is a massive thing, and Palantir is now one of these mega tech huge companies, and we'll come to your role in just a second. But Shan, I just wonder if for the Prime Minister, whatever was in the deal, however good or not it is, the government still has a massive challenge in people feeling any benefit from this. Do you think that the public is in any way, shape or form feeling more optimistic after, trade deal with India, trade deal with America?
Well, I think we have to see, don't we? Because as Joseph points out, in terms of the detail, we don't quite know what the detail is yet. I think there will be steel workers who will breathe a huge sigh of relief. Obviously, in the car trade, a 10% tariff is better than a 27.5% tariff. Yeah. But then that lasts a year and on a certain number of cars. So I think it's sort of we wait to see what the detail is.
But Louis, some people...
Let me say one thing.
Yep.
Uncertainty is really bad, and Trump has been maximizing uncertainty.
That he enjoyed. Flood the zone, says the phrase. But Louis, Palantir is one of these mega huge tech companies that seems to be really thriving in this new world, partly because of what you're doing here with the government and the NHS and local councils, but also with what's happening in the US. I mean, should people, I think sometimes our viewers and people in this studio are a bit worried about what the big tech companies are doing and just how big they are to start with.
Well, I think that size and that power that you mentioned is really a function of the power of the technology that they are inventing. I think we are at the very early stages of a profound AI revolution that is going to transform all aspects of our lives, our economies, our jobs. And the truth is a lot of that is being developed in the US. primarily it is a US endeavour, but we in the UK have a very, very unique competitive advantage globally in the talent base we have. Outside of the US, in the West, broadly defined, we are the only country that has the quantity and quality of that kind of engineer that you need to do AI.
Some people look at what's happening. There's even a group of former Palantir employees in the US who've written a letter who think that the company's not behaving ethically, doing things like getting involved in surveillance of people who are going to be deported. And I think some people in this country look at that and think, we don't really want our government to be doing that kind of business.
Yeah, well, I would push back very strongly at those critiques. I think, we are... Well, firstly, we have been a company that's never worked in countries that are adversarial to the West, so China, Russia, and so forth. And secondly, we don't play politics. So that means I, Palantir, do not believe that decisions about what's right and wrong, what policy a government should execute, should be made in company boardrooms.
But your founder, Peter Thiel's, big friends with Donald Trump, very outspoken about what he's trying to achieve. So you're really not playing politics?
But then our chief executive is a card-carrying Democrat and was a major donor to Biden and Harris. So we represent that full political spectrum. And I think those decisions need to be made at the ballot box and in the courtroom, not company boardrooms.
OK, we could talk about so much more with you three, but that's fascinating. We'll be back with you at the end of the programme. Now, as we saw earlier, by the massive increase in net migration, that happened between 2021 and 2023. The Conservative government relaxed visa regulations for many types of workers under Boris Johnson's points-based system. But just at the end of their time in office, they changed the rules again, and it started to come down. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, was part of that administration, and he is with us here. So it was good to have you with us. Which of the measures that Yvette Cooper is taking do you disagree with? She says she'll cut immigration by 50,000 this year.
Well, that, frankly, is too little. The measures that the last Conservative government took late in its time in office, too late, I would candidly acknowledge, will see migration levels drop by about 400,000 to 500,000. So her little 50,000 tweak, I think, is not enough. We would go further. And tomorrow we intend to push to a vote in Parliament a measure that would have an annual cap on migration voted for and set by Parliament to restore proper democratic accountability, because those numbers were far, far too high. That was a mistake. And I think it's actually been bad for our economy to have very large numbers of low-skilled people coming into the country, low-skill, low-wage, and businesses have, perhaps understandably, reached for that kind of low-skill, low-wage migration instead of investing in technology, automation and mechanisation, and instead of getting some of the 9 million working-age adults in this country who are not working into the workforce. Now, our policy is much tougher than Labour's. We're going to put it to a vote tomorrow, but I suspect Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer will vote against it.
Well, what would your cap be then? Because you told us 5 months ago that you'd have this idea of a cap. If it would be much tougher, as you say, than Yvette Cooper's cutting 50,000 visas, what would it be?
Well, we're working on the detail to specify that number. I'm not going to shoot from the hip. That work is happening as we speak.
Well, hang on. You've had 5 months ago, you told us you were going to have a cap. The government's now told us how much their cut is going to be. You're not going to tell us how much you would like to see
We are
a cut
working on the detail. I'm not going to shoot from the hip. I'll tell you a couple of things, though. It'll be a further reduction of significantly more than 50,000. It will take the levels substantially further down below the most recent forecasts from the OBS and ONR, which are about 300 to 350,000 a year.
So substantially below
substantially lower than that.
350,000.
And the further reductions, the further cuts, will be more than 50,000. We need to slash the levels of legal migration. It has been far too high. We've been dependent, we've become dependent as a country on mass low-skill migration. That's created pressure on public services. It's undermined social cohesion. And it's also, I think, one of the reasons why our productivity in this country, per hour worked or per person, has stagnated for quite a long time.
But then are you willing...
Let me finish the point. Because companies have reached for low-skill migration instead of investing in technology and automation.
But it's interesting, both the Home Secretary and you have said quite explicitly sometimes immigration in too big numbers can be bad for the economy. But what do you say to a business, the Conservatives, traditionally the party of business, and you're saying, well, you're not going to be able to get that kind of staff if you need them. Tough. You set a hard cap.
Well, we are going to set a hard cap. We're going to put that to a vote in Parliament, and I expect Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer will vote against it.
You said that already. So what do you say to businesses who might go, hang on a minute, I need staff, and if I can't get people in this country, they might not live locally, they might not have the right skills. What do you say to them? People who desperately need workers.
I would say three things. I would say, firstly, invest more in technology and automation. We've heard about AI and the impact that's going to have already. Take an example, South Korea.
So in South Korea, not people.
In South Korean manufacturing, they have 9 times the density of robotic automation that we do. So instead of importing huge numbers of low-wage migrants, instead invest in that technology.
So yes,
Answer
so
number
have
one.
robots, not people.
Yes, to avoid being dependent on mass low-skilled migration. Secondly, let's work on getting some of those 9 million working-age adults off benefits and out of economic activity into the workforce. Now, we're not going to get all of those into the workforce. Some are studying, some have caring responsibilities. But many of those 9 million, probably something in the order of 5 million, could, and in my view, should be brought into the workforce and trained up instead of importing cheap labour. In the care sector, for example, it only takes a few weeks to train somebody up. We should not be importing care workers. That was a huge mistake.
Will you support the government's idea of getting rid of care worker visas altogether? That's what the Home Secretary's announced on the programmes this morning. Will you support that?
Yes, I would. And the third answer to business is that a future Conservative government will be on the side of business. We will develop plans to reduce the burden of taxation on business. Business has been hit with the biggest tax rise in 30 years by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. That £25 billion NI increase, that is already destroying jobs and putting some companies out of work.
Taxation had already gone up to record levels under the Conservatives, and Labour has indeed put it up more, but it had already absolutely soared, much to the horror of some people in your party.
And I think that was, and speaking honestly, Laura, that was a mistake. And this new leadership will take a different approach. And my message to business is that we are on your side. We will develop plans to get that tax burden back down. It is already destroying jobs. It is lowering wages, according to the OBR. It's causing our growth to be slashed. The growth forecast has been slashed, all thanks to Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer.
So you were wrong about tax.
Back on businesses' side.
So you were wrong about tax. You were wrong about migration. Were you also wrong to sign contracts with accommodation providers that run until 2029 to house asylum seekers in towns around the country? Was that a mistake, using hotels for people coming here illegally?
Well, I think the reason that people are in hotels is that large numbers, principally because large numbers of illegal immigrants are crossing the English Channel. So the answer to the hotel problem and to the accommodation problem is to stop illegal immigration across the Channel. Now, we've seen, let me just finish the point, we've seen other countries successfully do this. Australia, about 10 or 15 years ago, with their Operation Sovereign Borders, where they returned illegal immigrants to a safe third country. We've seen America, in just the last few months, successfully get control of their southern border for the first time. Now, we had a plan in government. What I would concede...
So do you praise what Donald Trump has been doing in terms of those deportations, including some pretty controversial ways of deporting people without them having access to the courts? Do you support that?
So I'm not condoning the detail of every single deportation in the US. What I am saying is there is a principle which I think does work, and we've seen it work in Australia, which is that if somebody arrives into a country like the UK illegally by small boat, if they know they're going to be removed somewhere else, for example, Rwanda, but it could be somewhere else, then they're not going to attempt the crossing. And we had that policy ready to go. The first flight was due to take off at the end of July, but Keir Starmer cancelled it. And as a result of that, 2025 so far, this year, has been the worst year in history for illegal small boat crossings because they cancelled that plan.
And we've discussed that on many occasions with both Labour and Tory politicians. I just wonder, on the specific, though, under new leadership, you're always telling us you're going to be honest about your mistakes. I'll ask you again, was it a mistake to make a decision in 2019 to start housing asylum seekers in hotels in towns around the country? Was that a mistake?
I think there was a more fundamental mistake, which was to not have a Rwanda scheme in place at the beginning, which would have stopped it happening in the first place.
But was it?
It was a mistake of Keir Starmer to cancel the Rwanda scheme before it started, and we would reintroduce either that scheme or something very similar if we get back into office. And then you wouldn't need hotels.
OK, well, you've not quite given us an answer on that, but it's always good to have you with us in the studio in a busy week for the Home Secretary and the Shadow Home Secretary. Chris Philp, thanks very much indeed for being with us. Now then, time for something different. Who are your idols? Politicians? I'm not so sure. Journalists? Certainly not. Artists and musicians are probably a bit more likely. And one of the stars of his generation, Yungblud, otherwise known as performer Dom Harrison, is certainly an idol to many of his fans. And among his fans are Mick Jagger and Brian May. That's not too shabby, nor is his billion streams or legions of fans his own music festival called Bloodfest, created to give fans a cheaper price chance to love their music than the massively pricey tickets of some of the big established events, complete with yurts, celebs and those expensive vibes. His new album, called, you guessed it, Idols, is about to drop. And I was lucky enough to meet him in a recording studio recently to talk music, heroes and his generation.
Hello, are you out there? Are you trying? Are you patient? Are
people, Gen Z, if you want to use that phrase, you have become a bit of a spokesperson, if you like, a bit of a symbol. Because you've said also before, it's really scary being under 21 in this country.
It is. Nowadays, you are subject to so much on the internet. Like, if you look on your phone, you can kind of see so much information. You can see so much hate. Like, if you look in a comment section on the For You page, there is so much anger on it. Like, if you look at your friends, whatever, if you're on a For You page or you're on TikTok or whatever, you see a video, you go into the comments, it's 80% anger. And that's extremely scary.
But what do you think that's about? I mean, there's a lot of chat in this country at the moment about young men, role models for young men, this idea, and it's a bit of jargony, but this idea of toxic masculinity.
Completely.
What do you think is going on? And how do you think young men of all kinds can find their way through?
Especially with this album, I said at the start of it, I really want to embrace my masculinity, which is a crazy thing to say in 2025. You know what I mean? People are like, what?
Are you with me? Against me? Don't know me at all. Hello, 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 hello.
What I wanted to do when I kind of became what went into this new album was like, there is a different type of masculinity. There is a beautiful, pure, loving, caring, but also, like, I like to box, I like to sing, but I also like to wear a kilt or what I like. There's a new type of masculinity that can be out there and that can be shown. And as I say, with this community, what I want to give is I want to give love, and pure love, and an aspect of individualism that is accepted within a space.
And one of the places where you're creating that, bringing people together, is your own festival.
Yes.
I mean, you've even got your own festival now.
Completely. Wild.
Tell us about that. And also, I'm really interested in the fact your festival is a fraction of the cost to go to as a lot of the other big festivals.
Yeah, I feel like music really became a thing of privilege, and that should never be a thing, in my opinion. Like, if you can't see artists and bands, that's how I learned things, that's how I made friends, that's how I formed an identity. And if young people can't go out, see things in the real world and go and make friends, or go and find people with ideals that are mutual to them, like, that's scary to me.
The other thing that's different about it is it's so much cheaper than going to Glastonbury, going to Reading, going to the other big festivals. Why are you trying to do that, and why is it important to you?
I feel like everyone, no matter their stature, deserves a place to go and a great thing to experience, and that's what we wanted to provide. We were literally like, keep the tickets low, keep the experience beautiful, allow people to come together, bring in bands of new generation, old generation.
Do you think some of the festivals have got a bit kind of out of hand?
100%.
Thousands of pounds for fancy yurts?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's just, even being an artist, I'm like, this is just dumb, just stupid. It does not represent real people. And I think, like, when we're playing a festival, like, and it's like, I cannot play a festival where it's like 800 quid a ticket. How can you stand on stage and that's okay? You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, it's just, that's just not my style. And we wanted to come back and do 20 bands for 65 quid, because that's the way it should be, I think.
And will you stand by that, even if that means for you as an artist that you lose out on some
That's what I said. I think with it all, like, yeah, because I'll just make my own. That's my vibe. I'm literally just like, in this world, there is nothing you can't achieve if I believe you are doing it from a place of truth and for the right reason. Like, to be honest, I was tired of what the festival market was. I was tired that a lot of festival promoters didn't take me seriously. So I was like, start my own. Why not? Let's make it, and let's make a positive impact, a positive change, and make something bigger than just us.
So not booking Coldplay for the centrist ads?
I'd book Coldplay if they do it for like whatever. I'm like, come on, do it for the right reason. Come on, Chris, 65 quid a ticket, me and you, let's have it.
Let's then talk about some of the music that has
Yeah,
helped,
man.
understood, developed your emotion, the things that you connect with. So your new album's going to be called Idols.
Yeah.
Who are your idols?
Wow. Definitely David Bowie, 100%. I think the way that man really taught me fearlessness and almost an idea of if they don't know it yet or don't like it yet, they might do later. If you're confident enough, you know what I mean? They'll probably be dressing like you in 2 years if you just stick at it, you know what I mean? Obviously, Ozzy Osbourne. I think Ozzy was so integral to me because I was a loud, crazy, out-of-the-box kid, and he represented that idea. And I remember just like seeing his like glasses and his like big mouth, and I just had someone to identify with who would like allow me to embrace my madness or like never bottle that up. And I think seeing as that family have become like really close to me in the years, like Sharon has always given me advice on like the festival and kind of how like, again, like they'll get it later. Do not dilute your madness. Do not dilute your light. Let it just emit, and like people will love it, people will hate it, but they will get it eventually if you just keep in yourself.
What about Mick Jagger? I mean, we know he's noticed
Jagger, man.
you. At
Jagger,
80,
man.
he's still going.
I love him. Honestly, literally, like I remember going to see them at Anfield Stadium, and he was like, "I would like to meet you." It's crazy, man. I think like literally just the staple of rock and roll, and still doing it better than ever. And I was just like, that is the dream, isn't it? To be 75 or like nearly 80.
I think he is 80
like
now.
80, like playing to a like football stadium like he's 17.
So what's the hardest moment been? I mean, with huge success and huge fame comes massive pressure.
Hate is such a strange thing to deal with. It's never forget, someone came to me in a pub in East London and just was like, your music is terrible and I don't believe you and I hate it. And I think you can try and be like when you're put in a situation like that, you're like a wounded animal. You kind of try and lick yourself and bring yourself back to it. And I remember I was like 22 and I was trying to like, how do I respond to this? And I kind of was just like, oh yeah, cool, like really shut down. And I think about that like probably once a week. But in this new position that I'm in is like you realize when someone throws something at you like that, when someone hates you or throws a dagger like that, the only thing is in your control is if you allow them or you choose to give them the power of a reaction or of allowing you to feel that. To me, like what I've learned now is whatever that person's going through, that's not in my control. The only thing that's in my control is I allow that to affect me.
You're such a great communicator and you're obviously so interested in the world
Yeah.
and want people to have a better life. Would
Yeah.
you go into politics?
You know what? I have actually thought about that. I know it's crazy.
Not crazy?
I feel like you start something as a musician and then you kind of connect with people on a daily basis. Like I always make an effort to see people outside the gigs and see people walk around the festival. And this whole community was built on human connection about how people live and what people struggle with. And I thought maybe one day I think I could do something that would be, I could provide some good somewhere. So yeah, I think that has actually crossed my mind. Yungblud, the politician. Wow. Don't know how that'd stand up.
Heard it here first. Well, Yungblud's album Idols is out on June the 20th and his festival is on June the 21st, and he has become a bit of a spokesperson for his generation. We've got a millennial, a Gen X and a just boomer with us today. And Joseph, your new book, Road to Freedom, where you sort of look at what's changed in the economy, do you think the gap between the generations has got worse? I mean, if I dare ask, do you think the boomers got it wrong?
Yes. I think one of the things that's really become very difficult is the intergenerational inequities. Young people are finding it very difficult to buy a house, start their life. Worse in the United States than the UK, but UK is trying to catch up with the United States, making it difficult. For instance, student debt, UK, student debt has become a big thing. Not in Scotland. They have a very different model there. And so on top of the difficulty of getting started with a house, you're burdened with student debt. It's really putting people on a difficult course. And finally, we have to remember they're also saddled with a environmental debt, climate change. They're going to have to live with the climate change that our generation, generations before us, brought us along.
Louis, do you think it's much harder, or do you think it's just different because the world's changed?
Well, I think boomers are still in charge, and they have been in charge for almost 40 years. I mean, if you look at presidents in the United States, the last non-boomer to be elected was George Bush Sr. Clinton, Bush Jr. and Trump are all born within 6 weeks of each other in the summer of 1946. They're the first year, effectively, of the boomer cohort. But what's happening is, as I think of this year, for the first time, the millennial generation is larger than the boomer generation.
And you're a millennial in charge
of a big company. And I'm a millennial. So I think what you will see over the next 5 to 10 years is a generational transfer of power. And we haven't had that for 40 years. And I wonder if we are underestimating how destabilising and volatile that could be.
I was going to say, you said that with a bit of a flash in your eye, actually, but then you said it might be destabilising. I mean, Shan, how do you think the generation rising is sort of challenged in a different way? I mean, are things different or are they harder?
I agree with the fact that they're facing a lot more uncertainty politically, environmentally, and that's tough. Where I see optimism is when I hear people like Yungblud who are talking about social justice, who are saying he's what did he say? He's a sort of I'm crazy out of the box, and owning it and appreciating other people's differences and using creativity to be able to do that. We talk about Gen Z being the anxious generation, and I'm writing a book on anxiety. I can see the figures, but they have a language to talk about their mental health in ways that we probably didn't growing up. And I think that there is strength in that, and therefore I have real hope for this generation.
Well, it's nice to end this programme with hope. That doesn't happen necessarily that often, but it's been great to have you with us. Hope and the millennial shakedown of the boomers gone its way. Thank you, all three of you, very much indeed. And thank you for getting in touch too. You've been busy on your phones this morning. Pamela's gotten in touch to say we might need some specialist workers to fill gaps, but we do not need people to fill the lower paid job. Frank Redmond, though, says the Home Secretary's talking rubbish. We run a charity, and without foreign workers, we would not be able to run. Alison Jones got in touch about our interview with Steph. I've just listened to Steph's story, and I cried throughout it. She's so incredibly brave. That will be on iPlayer if you want to have a watch back to that later on. Thank you to our team at the desk. Guest sounds very similar. Thank you to all of our guests today, and of course, most of all, to you for watching at home. The government's immigration plans will be out in full tomorrow. There'll be plenty of coverage of that across the BBC, but the Home Secretary's already given us some big headlines this morning. The end of visas for care workers on the way. And with Reform UK chasing Labour hard for votes, Yvette Cooper's success or failure is very much linked with the overall success or failure for this government. No pressure then. I'll be with Paddy O'Connell for Sunday's newscast. You can listen to that later on BBC Sounds. And our whole conversation with the extraordinary Yungblud is on iPlayer, a longer version if you want to take a look. And after all of that, I look forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time, same place. Goodbye.